we will still wait a few minutes for more people to join, but we want to basically start by talking a little bit about what has happened in between the first day of the conference and today. A lot has happened.
It's been quite a exciting week. I mean, I guess we can say that for those of you who were able to join us last week, we conducted an informal poll on how people thought the election would turn out. And the majority of people, it seems, voted for us not having a clear outcome, or at least that's how we read the hand raise feature. And that was more or less until yesterday.
Yeah.
How things panned out.
So now Trump lost. As you see, we are all the problems are finished. We are in paradise, as you can see. We are like in this otherworldly situation.
Yeah, we've transported ourselves from Freud's study to
the Eden, like
Eden,
before the fall. Before the fall,
precisely.
So the first session, we have three great speakers. So we have Yannis Stavrakakis, we have Jace Sarah Titus, and we have Brian Friedberg. And but before we introduce them, let's talk a little bit more about
a bit of a summary of what's been going on, what the last week has been, and what it means for Posttruth. We just are waiting for the ability to share our screen because we've got a few images we wanted to share.
So a quick reminder, this is the Psychoanalysis and Posttruth event. It's basically organized by us, Jordan, me, and Phil Yeropoulos, and we are all together part of the Ministry of Posttruth, an informal group of artists and academics. Part of this conference, it was an online exhibition of video art. You can still access it, and we can share the link later on. And the first day has already happened last Sunday, and we had some great guests, and it was a really, really great event. So let's start with a recap.
Yeah. Oh, and just to go over the schedule once more, just so everyone knows, we'll do this session will go on until about 3:30. At 3:30 GMT, we're going to have a 30-minute break, and just like last time, we're going to include 20 minutes of a preview of the exhibition of artist videos related to Posttruth that we have online, and you should have received a link for that. We'll share it with you again if you haven't. But if you'd like to catch some of that, we'll be playing some different videos during the break. And then we'll have our final panel from 4 to 5:30. And then at the very end, for those who are able to stay, we're going to invite all of the panelists who presented over today and last week for a Q&A with the audience. So yeah, just a bit of what's happened so far. We've managed to share our screen. So
Biden won.
And even the Murdoch press seems to be acknowledging this in a quite surprising turn of events. The Murdoch-owned papers and news channels have openly criticized Trump for refusing to accept the election result.
So we talk about post-truth, and of course, this is like such a great example of such a post-truth moment. So, we have the election results, and Donald Trump is kind of basically saying, I won the election by a lot. And what we see that is really interesting when we start reading into this kind of situation is also the fact that immediately this tweet has been censored by Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
And
and in a sort of strange reflection of the way in which the official kind of sources of the press and of the role of power seems to be shifting. Trump himself doesn't even seem to have access to a proper place to hold a press conference, as was widely mocked online. He said he would be hosting his press conference at the Four Seasons, but that was not, it turned out, the hotel, but a place called Four Seasons Total Landscaping.
So I think that's interesting. They mentioned like truth as power. So you need to have the power to make the truth. Nothing like, mind blowing here. We go to the basics again of Foucauldian truth, like theory and stuff, but and political theory in general. But but I feel it's quite spectacular to see it like happening on live television.
Yeah, this is again headlines about the press that helped catapult Trump's rise to power now turning on him. And as you were saying, the censoring of Trump on official platforms like Facebook and Twitter. So here we have some examples of Trump in one case talking about the number of votes that he received and implying that some of the votes that went for Joe Biden were not legal. And interestingly, even his attempt to launch an election defense task force where he's raising funds for what will probably be a legal and political battle are receiving kind of official announcements from Facebook saying Joe Biden is the projected winner of the 2020 US presidential election. So without Trump even in this advert directly saying that he doesn't accept the results, Facebook feels the need to remind its readers that, this is the truth.
And for many commentators, and especially liberal commentators, this idea that, we've been telling Twitter and Facebook to censor Trump all along this way, but finally they're doing it. But of course, there is a discussion that we can have today about who is deciding, what is to be censored, basically, and what are the processes that, get us to these kind of results. And especially when it comes to Facebook and Twitter, for example, there's a lot of intransparency, about how these decisions are being taken, basically.
Yeah, and why, for example, Trump and other right-wing dictators in other parts of the world have not been censored. Although this actually touches on something quite personal as well.
So last week, we, as organizers of this event, but also the Freud Museum itself, we got all banned from Facebook.
This was the message we received. This is a screenshot of literally what we encountered when we tried to switch on our Facebooks last week.
It was not a temporarily ban for a couple of weeks. No, the message was you're permanently banned from the platform because you've broken the rules.
And it didn't tell us which rules we'd broken either. So it was just very Kafkaesque. We know what the rules are. You won't know. We've reviewed it. It can't be reversed. No one to speak to.
So this event that was about Posttruth had contained some keywords that, according to the algorithm, make us, I don't know, bad people, dangerous, interfering with the election. One theory is that because we talk about QAnon, and Brian will present later on QAnon, that's in itself something that gets us banned.
Potentially the fact that we use some of the images to sort of critically analyze on Facebook may have triggered an algorithm that said they want to delete the page.
So so we had to basically make an appeal to Facebook to get back both Freud Museum, an established institution, but also our personal profiles back. And fortunately, we managed to do it after 3 days. But it was quite a weird experience to just wake up and your profile of 10 years of personal photos and discussions is not there, and you don't have an explanation, and there is no one to speak to. There is no, there is no process in place.
It's worth saying the process through which we think we managed to get our accounts restored was not some official kind of complaint procedure, but very much in keeping with the sort of ways that power operates. We had to figure out what possible connections we might have to people involved in Facebook, and friends of friends eventually somehow maybe got to somebody who had a look at what went on. So the sort of to some degree it was only through a bit of nepotism that we managed to restore the platform for.
But I think it made me a bit less enthusiastic about the fact that Trump is being banned right now, because I'm okay, yes, I'm excited that finally something is happening that delineating that this is not acceptable or whatever. But at the same time, how does this mechanism work? And
just shifting gears a little bit to talk about what some of the reactions have been to Joe Biden's win. So one of the kind of interesting pieces of news that circulated a bit on Twitter is around the surprising fact that although Trump did quite well, at the same time, progressive policies that we would associate with the left of the Democrats also seemed to do quite well. So for example, in the state of Florida that went Republican, voted for Trump, but at the same time passed by popular mandate a $15 minimum wage. And here we have an example from Fox News, where they ran a series of polls around the same time as the election and found all kinds of quite surprising statistics, such as 39% of Americans strongly favor changing to a government-run healthcare plan and 33% somewhat favor. So the vast majority of Americans favoring the Medicare for All plan that candidates like Bernie Sanders are running on.
And at the same time, we see that for men, like we have this example from Paul Krugman here, is the more I look at this election, the more I imagine I understand.
The less I imagine.
The less I imagine, of course.
Yeah, so we have liberal commentators who are very confused.
So in theory, we're like, Trump is out, post-truth is over. Things should make more sense now. But like for Paul Krugman, things make no sense now, like less sense than they made before. So that's an interesting thing. And I feel like us as people who either study psychoanalysis or practice psychoanalysis, being in psychoanalysis, I think that's an interesting thing because, psychoanalysis thrives in this kind of contradictions and thrives in paradoxes. And also it's quite exciting to see the truth that is on the surface, because maybe things make sense. Like maybe what is happening makes sense, but we don't want to face the sense it makes.
Right. So there's a quite straightforward argument that people further to the left have been saying all along, which is that left populism has a real chance at defeating right populism, and so the kinds of policies that people can see materially benefit them, like an increased minimum wage, actually have a lot of popularity, and perhaps those candidates who stand on a platform of fighting for them would do better than the right-wing candidates that the Democrats are currently opposing with centrism. And
of course, like there are many commentators who completely disagree, and they're like, oh, because of the left and all this radical politics of the past few years, many people were scared in Florida, etc.